Hi, everybody. As you can see, I am joined by, there she is over there, by my co-host on Trek Reluctantly, for those of you who watch that live stream every Wednesday, Dana. Hi, Dana.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for
And
having me on your channel.
yeah, first time, right? And we're going to do one of these things that we do from time to time where we get together and talk about a thing. And actually, it's apropos that I mentioned Trek Reluctantly when I introduce you, Dana, because this that we're going to talk about is sort of a branching off of Trek Reluctantly, because we're going to talk about, because we're going to talk about Star Trek.
Oh, I thought we were talking about Star Wars.
Different star thing.
Oh, man. Wait, let me get my notes. Just kidding. I'm so ready.
Because you always get those confused.
Yes, I know. They're so similar.
They're so similar. We watched just this morning, together an episode of Deep Space Nine that will not be a part of our Trek Reluctantly watch, because I am skipping episodes of Deep Space Nine as we watch them. We're not watching every single episode. And one of the episodes I said we were going to skip when we get to this point in the series is Profit and Lace. But we talked about it a little bit after the live stream the other night. And you said, well, why are we skipping that one? And, what's the deal with that episode? And I told you a little bit about it. And you said, well, let's watch it.
What you said about this was it wasn't as good as the other episodes that you'd chosen to keep in, but that you thought it would, it'd be more about conversation. I was like, I can talk.
It raises certain questions. It provokes discussion of certain issues. It is perhaps the most obviously problematic episode of Deep Space Nine. We're talking about Profit and Lace, which is from, I've forgotten how late in the series this is. This is actually from season 6. This is the episode where, for a rather complex set of reasons, Quark undergoes a temporary sex change operation to present as a woman in order to lobby an influential Ferengi businessman to support an amendment to the rules of acquisition, which is like the Ferengi constitution, that will give more rights to Ferengi women who are very brutally subjugated.
Is it Ishara or Ishka?
Ishka, yeah.
Ishka. I knew it was Ish something.
Quark's mom's name, yeah.
Ishka. So she's got
Although, interestingly enough, Ishara is also a Star Trek character's name, but anyway, go.
There you go.
It was just rattling around in your brain.
So in general, she's got a strong not like other girls vibes, which is that's a big problem for me, that she is presented as an atypical Ferengi woman. And that factors into why Quark has to be the one to, go through cosmetic surgery and some, they also mentioned he's had some hormone therapy type things, because Ishka is the only Ferengi female character who gets any significant screen time, at least as far as I know. That means that hers is the only ongoing exploration of what a woman's role in society ought to be. And the result of that is that comes across as definitive. One of the things that really, really stood out to me was Rom's statement that no woman is complete without earrings. And it just goes by. Nobody comments on that, at all. And I'm just like, okie dokie, I am not wearing earrings. And in fact, I think while we were watching it, I said, I guess I'm.
You said, I'm not wearing earrings. I guess I'm not complete. Well, I think that was mostly that's part of the running gag that they have for Rom on that episode, where he seems to have more of an insight, or at least he thinks, more of an insight into womanhood than the other men do. And whether it's accurate or not is a completely different matter, because I think it's fair to say whether he actually knows anything for real or not, but he behaves as though and is treated as though among the Ferengi men, he somehow, because he teaches Quark how to walk and how to sit like a lady. And then he comes out with this supposed insight, no woman is complete without earrings, brother. And it's like, how do you know?
Yeah, but first of all, I just realized how much Quark sounds kind of like Stuffy.
Well, Rom,
thank you.
Which I would chalk up to my own limitations as a mimic.
Yeah, but I noticed it. Rom sounds a lot like Stuffy, and I noticed it when I said it first. I was like, I sound like Stuffy.
Doing kind of a Stuffy voice.
Yeah, doing kind of a Stuffy voice there. But no, it goes back to narrative framing. Like, it's not, the narrative doesn't ridicule Rom for, being like, oh, I know what women are like. No, you don't. This is your
I know it.
soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what you mean. Like, because it's played for a laugh,
Mm-hmm.
but the laugh they're going for is that Rom is acting kind of strangely, or just kind of a random thing about Rom that, adds to his idiosyncrasies. And the joke isn't that Rom thinks he has insight into women that he doesn't actually have.
Mm-hmm.
The joke is, why
Rom
does Rom know
understands
so
women.
much about women? Yeah.
Well, not only that, but also remember that Quark is the one who's chosen because he's got the business sense and Rom doesn't. So having Ben Rom be the one who understands women also says something about femininity. Like, the one with less business sense is the one who understands femininity.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot going on there. And some of it, again, it's the limitations of how much can we put down to this is the character. And you have to, and I think we have a responsibility to look at the narrative framing. So how much of it is framed as this is unique to the character, and how much of it is these character elements, like Rom's not having as much business acumen as Quark, is connected. It happens coincidentally that he's the one who is chosen to have a greater understanding of performative femininity. And that's the other thing. This is how even when some of the female characters present this is how, because I think Lita also does some this is how women behave type stuff. It's presented as this is how women behave. It's not presented as, because that's not what Quark is trying to do. Quark is not trying to behave as a woman. Quark, in order to get the deception to work,
Yeah.
Quark has to behave in a way that fits the expectations of a misogynist who is looking outside the box of what a woman would be like, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
no, absolutely.
She's not just being an authentic woman. It's not about being authentically female. It's about
convincing
performing in such a way that you're going to fool that dude.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And it keeps overlooking that. And that would be such a really interesting point to make. And it's just completely ignored. It's presented as though Quark needs to behave in a way that is authentically feminine. And no, because, it gets into, well, what are we saying about what it means to be authentically feminine? Because that's what it does. And that, I think, is a big part of the problem, as well as the whole man in a dress thing is funny.
You just touched on something that I was going to bring up in relation to what you've been talking about the whole time about, how, like, the problem of presenting certain things as authentically feminine and whether or not that's what they're trying to do. And one of the big problems with the episode, to me, and one of the things that makes it problematic in terms of, the social and political issues that it's touching on, whether it means to or not, it is how shallow it is. And the reason that it's that shallow is because they're going for farce. So in that sense, it's okay that it's shallow, but the problem is it also deals with some very serious issues and deals with them in a very shallow way. And that's where you run into problems. That's where that's the kind of thing that makes you go, when you watch it, not because you're demanding that it must go deeper and be more intelligent about these issues. It's like, no, if you want to tell a silly, shallow farce, that's fine.
Maybe
just
don't
be
use
aware
something important to do it.
Yeah, be aware of, the sort of, because, like, it strikes me that what we see going on with the characters in the episode is probably not at all unlike the behind the scenes process that led to the creation of the episode, which is it's a bunch of men trying to figure out how women are supposed to act. And you know what I mean? Like, it's Lita and Ishka by that point is in sickbay, has had her episode. So that's why Quark is, compelled to impersonate a woman. So Lita's the only woman in the room, and she really doesn't have a whole lot to do. It's mostly the men who are taking control and telling Quark, here's how a woman acts, here's how a woman walks, here's how a woman talks, here's what you have to do to be a woman. And the episode was written by dudes, directed by a dude. The creative team in general of Deep Space Nine was male dominated. So you sort of end up with episodes like this every now and then.
There's a lot that's just like doesn't even occur, and it's like, ooh, ha, oh. And then of course I had subtitles on, so I noticed some things. The references to, it's not men, and they call Ferengi women females.
Females. They always refer to them as females.
That's a thing.
Yeah.
So that's pretty spot on, because that is definitely a tell. That is absolutely a tell. But they present men in contrast to female. When they talk about Ferengi, they use Ferengi.
Yeah, right.
They mean Ferengi men. And so it's interesting that language that normalizes that when they say Ferengi, they mean men. And that's sort of the what's it called when you flip the numerator and denominator? It's not the reverse.
Inversion?
Inversion. Yeah, it's like the inversion of that. In English, that historically has had male as default and feminine as a subordinate offshoot.
Right.
With words and phrases like the brotherhood of mankind, used to mean the common bond of humanity, where women are included in that, even though we're referring to everyone as male. With Ferengi, it's the other way around. We refer to everyone as Ferengi, but we only mean the men.
Right.
And so it's misogynistic in like the inverted way.
And it's the assumption of it, not so much that it's explicitly gendered language.
Just everybody knows, right? It's difficult to think outside of the box that you're in, because there are some ways in which, like, there are some of the episodes that do critique our culture, but the ones with the Ferengi feel very much like, oh, we've already come so far. We're almost to where Star Trek is. Lol.
See, I think it's interesting that you take it that way, because I find the Ferengi to be, at least the references to sort of the excesses of Ferengi society, like they're, completely over the top misogyny
capitalism
and gender inequality. They're over the top capitalism, where it's like, it's basically like the state religion, not just the economy. Like, I mean, I take those as some of the most sharply satirical parts of the show, because that's an explicit satirical attack on maybe not in certain ways our culture in general, but specifically on right-wing conservatives who, when they talk about like the free market, their language isn't all that far removed from the way Ferengi talk about business and profit in the show. So, I mean, I don't think the Ferengi are there. At least I don't think the intention is to make them look so bad that our society looks good in comparison. I think it's to say, like, no, these guys are a lot like people in our own society, and that's what we're making fun of.
I get that vibe more often when they're going for the capitalist critique. I can kind of see what you say, that maybe it is a sharper look at conservative misogyny, but that's not how it comes across to me. And some of it also is, the men who write these episodes think of themselves as hashtag the not all men. So
I'm sure they did. Yeah.
Those guys. And so in the same way that I see it as, we're saying, oh, look at those Ferengi, they're not like us, but maybe they're critiquing those men. We're not like them. They're not like us. And it's still a similar vibe.
I do think it's also not a coincidence that the Ferengi are both ultra capitalistic and ultra misogynistic. I think it's intentional that those two things go hand in hand, because we do often see them, they are often comorbid in real people, like in very far right conservative men specifically. It's very rare to find a conservative dude who is like all about the free market and all about earning profit and all about capitalism, and and is also like a huge feminist who is a champion of women's rights. Like, you don't usually find that very often. So I don't think it's an accident that the Ferengi are both of those things.
No, but that would be interesting.
So there are a couple of things about the episode on kind of a basic storytelling level that I feel like make it problematic in addition to all the stuff we've been talking about so far. There's the issue of the fact that you have the story of Ferengi women about to achieve some measure of equality, or at least a greater measure of equality than they have up to this point. There's going to be some big social advancement, and it's in favor of women and will benefit women. And it is going to be done by a woman, by Ishka. Originally, the plan is she's going to be the one to try and negotiate this agreement to pass this amendment. But then she falls to the side and it becomes a man who has to do it. That's a problem. There's the whole, like you referenced it in passing a little bit ago, the whole classic farcical trope of man in a dress equals funny. That's a big problem. And that's not...
It can be, but it could also be done well. Because essentially, the reason it can be funny and not be problematic is you've got a fish out of water scenario. Because the issue, it can be funny if the issue is it's something that's unfamiliar to him. That he's never, part of the thing is that they're teaching him, that they present it as teaching him to walk as a woman. But he's wearing, it looks like he may be wearing boots or heels or something that is unfamiliar to him. So some of that is, and he talks about the earrings not being comfortable for him. So some of it is the unfamiliarity. He is doing something that's different, and he's expected to do it in a way that makes it look like he's practiced with it, he's experienced, and he's not. So that, if it's framed, again, that narrative framing, if it's framed that way, you don't know about this because you haven't done it before, then I would have way less of an issue with it.
I think that would make it
inherent nature.
I think that would make it less of a problem. I feel like it's difficult to justify man in a dress as like as a comedic trope, under any circumstances. I mean, I do think if you focus on the things you just mentioned, it would be less of a problem, but it's still like, why even do it? And
because it carries that much, all of that baggage of how it's always or typically been done is going to come with it.
Yeah. And that's really where I come down on the episode as a whole, is like, and then there's also the sexually aggressive Ferengi dude going after Quark as a lady at the end, which, as you say, comes across really rapey, isn't funny. Like, even if you, and that's another problem I have with the episode, apart from the various things we've been talking about, even if you are somehow able to set all of the, cringe-inducing stuff about gender to the side and look at it just mechanically as how does it function as a comedy, it doesn't really work. It's just not very well done on any level. And, one of my rules is, well, there's the rule of funny, and if it makes me laugh, I'll let you get away with almost anything. This doesn't even come close. Like this, I think I remembered this episode better than I found it when we watched it today. And I've never had a particularly high opinion of it for the reasons we've been discussing this whole time. But we were watching it this morning and I kept having the thought, boy, this is really not very good. Because there are certain people in the Star Trek fandom that just have a real hate on for the Ferengi episodes of Deep Space Nine. Like, they don't like any of them. They don't want to see anything about the Ferengi. I have a much larger soft spot for them than a lot of other people do. Like, some of the Ferengi episodes in Deep Space Nine, I have come to really enjoy because they're funny. This one isn't funny. This one is like a just radically miscalculated attempt at farce, miscalculated in terms of its politics and miscalculated just in terms of its
execution,
its comic sensibilities. Yeah, its execution. It's just rotten.
I wouldn't say rotten. There were a couple places where I don't remember if it made me laugh or if I was just like, oh, that's nice. The build of acting Grand Negus. And then that shot,
that running joke,
where it's framed and one person says it and then everybody around him says, acting Grand Negus. It's like, I liked that. That was just, just small. And then the ongoing running joke where Rom says, this is my son. He's just been accepted in the Starfleet. And I think it's the Grand Negus who says, well, I won't hold that against him.
Yeah, that was funny.
Nice. So little bits here and there, which really didn't have anything to do with the episode. And there are things like
there are pleasures to be found in some other performances.
Mhm.
Like Max Grodenchik is great as Rom, as he always is. Wallace Shawn is great as the Grand Nagus, as he always is. You know,
I can't. Never going against the Sicilian when death is on the line.
never go in against a Ferengi when death is on the line.
It's like he was able to take that and just dial it the heck up there. There were a number of them. I was aware of much more physical acting for the comedy, like the hamming it up, and not because of the makeup, not being able to do as much with your face. Just the not even gesturing, but in trying to be feminine, moving the shoulders back. I was just like, I noticed it more in this episode. And of course, with the trying to be female, that allowed the actor to play around with that more. But I think that sort of thing would work just as well in a regular episode, just because they have so much makeup on, and especially with Quark, the outfits that they have him on tend to be very heavy and they move in a very structured way. And so I think that, granted, this was halfway through season 6, or most of the way through season 6, I think.
Yeah.
So not a whole lot more, but going forward from there, it's like that should be really good just for playing the character.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not like every single element of it was bad, but it's like I keep coming back to they just shouldn't have done this. I mean, and then I was thinking, how could they have done this? Like, would there have been any way to do this episode and keep the same basic plot and not have it end up as such a dumpster fire? And I don't know if you could, unless you got rid of the man in a dress part of it, which I feel like is the main reason they did it. Like that was
the starting point
for the writers. The hook was, we got to get Quark in a dress. We got to do a classic we got to do a Three's Company episode, with Quark as Jack. And that's just the whole reason they did it. But, I'm thinking about some of the suggestions you've made and some of the things you're pointing out. And one of my issues with it, which is that it sidelines a female character and then puts a male character in her place to actually be the star of the show, which again, like, makes sense in the sense that like Quark is actually a regular in the show. And I have no problem like featuring regulars ahead of recurring. Like, it would be kind of weird if if it suddenly became the Ishka show for an episode. But, it's like she's the only. Yes, please. You're dying to say something.
Idea. So, they could get around this by having the dude that they're talking to saying it does, that's just because Ishka's weird. That's not how women are. That's just her. We don't need to have this amendment. And that gives them a reason to say, oh no, she's not the only one like that, and have, the say, oh really? And they're like, we need another woman. And so Quark appears as Ishka's secretary or like personal assistant. And so Ishka gets to teach Quark how to be, how to act like, a different kind of woman, but still, feminine and still also good at business. And have possibly some banter between them about, Ishka acting as, that Quark is the younger, Ishka is the mentor and Quark is the up and comer who is learning from the master. And, it also gets a chance to, kind of put Quark in his place as well, because, now he has to behave as though, oh, he's excited to be learning about business from Ishka, which of course, in his mind, it's like, no,
the ultimate indignity.
She's the female. It's like, I should be teaching her.
She's the female, and she's his mother, who he has a very antagonistic relationship.
No, I think that could be a lot of fun.
It could, and it could have been funny enough to overcome the stigma of ha 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 man in a dress. Mm-hmm. Maybe. So that's a good idea.
If I wrote it, it would.
Well, you always say that.
Of course. And I think you could write it well too.
Well, what my idea is, and the only caveat is they would have had to think many episodes ahead in order to do it the way I'm about to propose. The way I would propose doing it is just eliminate the man in a dress angle completely. which again is fundamentally changing the episode, which, some people might not think is fair because that's the whole reason they did the episode was to have a man in a dress.
Yeah, but I
But
mean,
I
you can
think,
move past the initial concept
yeah,
when you're in the planning stages.
yeah,
Be like, that's what starts it off, and then it goes in a different direction. That
right.
happens.
So with all of that being said, and all
Yeah.
of those, caveats being laid out, I think the best way to do it would be to have already established a female Ferengi character who lives on the station. Maybe she works at Quarks, maybe she doesn't, but she's a Ferengi woman who lives on the station. She's kind of an Ishka type character, only maybe a little bit more radical or a little bit more of an outcast from Ferengi society. Like she called bullshit on the way Ferengi treat their women a long time ago and packed her shit and left. And now she's been just sort of living outside the Ferengi sphere on her own and has a lot of resentment toward the Ferengi society and has kind of an attitude problem. And is maybe just someone that she's never been the focus of an episode. She maybe has never even had like a whole scene devoted to her in an episode, but we know who she is. We know her name. We know what her deal is. She's like a known quantity in the show by this point. And then she has kind of an antagonistic relationship toward Quark.
That's where I was going.
Yeah.
And
And she's the one.
And there are no romantic sparks between them.
No, I don't. I wouldn't want it to go that direction. No.
Yeah, no. But I mean, I'm sure. I guarantee you, there would be push for that.
No, of course there would. Yeah. Of course there would. But no, I wouldn't want that. But anyway, so she's established as being a person with, and this is her character, and she's on the station, and Ishka goes down, has her heart attack, whatever, and then this other Ferengi woman is their only option. They have to turn to her and talk her into playing the role of the, acceptable Ferengi female who also has, the lobes for business. And she does what Quark has to do in the episode, only it's not about changing gender abruptly and learning how to be the other gender. It's about learning kind of like what you were saying about how to be like the proper type of Ferengi female who would be acceptable to this business guy, and also kind of have to choke down all of her bile about Ferengi society in general and having to eat shit from this misogynist Ferengi guy.
Building on that, I would put it as, she has those out there ideas, but she's not interested. The reason she left was because she wasn't interested in profit. But she wants to do her own thing. Maybe she wants to create art or whatever.
Yeah.
She's not going to get to impregnate, but she doesn't have the business acumen that they need. That's not where she's going for.
True.
So she's also that fish out of water. And maybe she's also not that feminine the way that Ishka is, but they're saying, in order to make this work, we need you to do this, use your artistic sensibilities. Think of this, maybe she is an actor, but she rejects, she doesn't want to go into that role because that's what's expected of her,
Yeah. She could be like an artist on the station.
Yeah.
Like we could establish that she runs like a studio on the promenade. One of the shops on the promenade is like her art studio. And, she sells art to people and sort of earns a little bit of a living that way. And, but she doesn't do it for profit. She does it because she likes making art and it furnishes her the ability to keep doing it.
Or she has the art there, but somebody else manages the studio, like the shop front, because she doesn't have any business.
Yeah, sure.
And it's one of the Bajorans.
Yeah, there's all kinds of fun you could have with it. Yeah, like she's a Ferengi who has no business sense and isn't interested in it, and pays someone else to do that stuff for her. Yeah, and she's the one who they have to go to and be like, "We need your help. You're the only other Ferengi," because
yeah. You mean, help me, Ferengi lady. You're my only hope.
You're my only hope. There you go, confusing it with Star Wars again.